Have you ever had the feeling that life has lost its shine? As if the whole world had become dull, somewhat tasteless? Well, I know what it's like. My name is Claudia, and 2 years ago, I lost the man I swore was the love of my life. Jonathan was everything to me, but when he left a hole so big it seemed impossible to fill. For 2 years, I just survived. His scent still lingered in the corners of the house, like a memory that refused to go away. The photos, scattered everywhere, as if he would walk through the door at any moment. But what really killed me was the silence, that suffocating silence that only those who have lost someone understand. And then, summer came. That's when everything changed. Nathan, Jonathan's nephew, decided to spend a few months with me. He said he needed to escape the madness of the city. He is 28 years old, full of energy, a breathtaking smile, and, I will confess, he brought an unexpected warmth to this house that had been cold for a long time. At first, he was just a boy I barely knew, but there was something about him, a way of looking at myself, as if he saw beyond this woman that the years had marked, as if, after so long, someone finally saw me. In truth, I remember perfectly the day Nathan arrived. He got out of the car with that relaxed gait, wearing worn jeans that hugged his body in just the right way, and a t-shirt that seemed tailor-made to show off every detail of his curves. When our eyes met, my God, those green eyes held me, as if he could see all the secrets I hid. "You look amazing, Claudia," he said as soon as he saw me. Simple, direct, but coming from him, oh, that moved me. I thanked him, trying to appear unshakable, but inside, my heart was beating like that of a teenager caught in the middle of mischief. In the first few days, everything seemed normal. He spent his mornings in the garden, exploring every corner of the house, as if he was looking for something that I didn't even know was there. But what really made me uneasy was how much he was present, always there, always close by. Until, one afternoon, he found me on the porch. I had a cup of tea in my hands, trying to calm my thoughts. "Can I join you?" he asked with that easy smile, the kind of smile that makes you forget your own name. Without waiting for my answer, he pulled out a chair next to me and sat down. When our eyes met, I felt that chill. Not cold, but a warmth that I hadn't felt in a long, long time. It was one of those days where the heat seemed to slow everything down, as if time was flowing along with sweat. I was in the garden, looking at an old fence that needed fixing. Before I could move, Nathan appeared. That mischievous smile on your face, the kind that makes anyone lose focus. "Do you need help with that?" he asked, pulling the hem of his shirt to wipe the sweat from his forehead. It was just a quick gesture, but enough to expose a piece of that golden skin to the sun. For a second, I was paralyzed. When I finally regained my composure, I responded with an, "If you want." That came out almost like a whisper. He got to work. Without saying much, but with a presence that said it all. Every movement seemed charged with intent, as if he knew I was watching him. And yes, I watched. It couldn't be avoided. Then, in one of those moments he knew how to time so well, he looked up. "You don't have to do everything alone, Claudia. Not anymore." His voice had a husky, intimate tone that spoke directly to my weakness. How did he know? How could he understand the weight I carried without even knowing the whole story? That dismantled me. When we finally finished, we were sitting on the lawn, side by side, arms lightly touching. It was such a simple touch, but the heat rising from there. That was another story. Nobody said anything, but the silence spoke for us. Then came his idea of going up to the attic. "I want to know more about you," Nathan said, with that challenging tone that made me shiver. I hesitated. That attic held memories that I had avoided for years. But the look in his eyes, it was impossible to say no. In the middle of the boxes, he found a photo of me, from before I met Jonathan. When Nathan held that photo, it was as if time had stopped. He looked for a long time, a teasing smile on his lips. "You were a traffic-stopping woman, Claudia. Still are." The way he said it made my face blush, something I didn't even remember what it was like. I tried to look away, change the subject, but the way he was holding the photo as if he were admiring a work of art, dismantled me. Life was so different back then, I muttered, almost to myself. Nathan approached, so close that you could feel his heat. And who said it can't be different now? Who said it's over, Claudia? His tone was firm, but his voice was low, like an invitation. Our eyes met, and at that moment, the air became heavier, charged with a silent desire that no one dared to name. I laughed, trying to hide my nervousness, and went back to moving the boxes, as if that could drown out the heat that was rising through my body. But it was useless. Because the truth was there, staring me in the face. He saw me in a way I hadn't seen myself in years, and it affected me in a way that I didn't know how to deal with. That night was different. After what happened in the attic, my mind wouldn't stop. Nathan's words echoed in my thoughts. Who said it's over, Claudia? It was as if he had lit a spark, one that I had extinguished myself a long time ago. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt restless. It wasn't just about Jonathan. It was about me, about the woman I had stopped being. Nathan had thrown a mirror in my face, and the reflection told me something I didn't want to admit. I had more desire than courage. I got up. The silence in the house felt suffocating, and I went to the kitchen in search of something to distract my thoughts. I opened a bottle of wine, and the first sip burned my throat, but it wasn't enough to quench the heat inside me. It was then that I heard footsteps. Can't you sleep too? His voice came low, hoarse, as if coming out of a dream. I turned around, and there he was, barefoot, his hair messy, a shirt that barely made an effort to cover his broad shoulders. Yeah, something like that. My voice was lower than I expected, but the way he looked at me, as if he knew exactly what I was thinking, made me catch my breath. It wasn't the wine that made my body boil. It was him. The next day, Nathan looked different, quieter, introspective, as if something was bothering him. I took advantage of the moment at breakfast to try to understand. Everything is fine? I asked, watching him as he absently stirred his coffee cup. I was just thinking about how cruel life can be sometimes, he replied, still not looking at me. That caught me off guard. It was the first time he spoke without that provocative, confident tone. For the first time, he looked vulnerable. I lost someone too, he confessed, finally looking up at me. Not in the same way you lost Jonathan, but he was someone who meant a lot. And for a while, I too thought my life was over. The silence that followed seemed louder than the sound of the wind outside. There was tension in the air, but not the provocation like before. It was something deeper. Then he continued, with an honesty that almost disarmed me. I guess that's why I came here. I needed something more. Peace. And, maybe, you. Those last words hung in the air, like a confession spoken in the heat of the moment. He looked like he wasn't sure if he should have said them, but instead of looking away, I glared at him. Nathan, you're not alone in this, I said, my voice softer than I intended. In some ways, I think we're helping each other heal wounds we didn't even know were so open. After that, everything changed. Every conversation with Nathan seemed to peel back a layer I didn't even know was there. It was as if he opened windows in me, one by one, letting in a fresh wind of possibilities. Sitting on the porch, with the gentle warmth of the afternoon sun surrounding us, he looked at me sideways and asked, "Have you ever thought about dropping everything and starting over?" "Start again?" I repeated, letting out a nervous laugh. "Nathan, let's be real. At this point in my life, you think it's that simple?" He leaned forward in his chair, his gaze fixed on mine, as if he wanted to pull me somewhere I feared going. "Claudia, sometimes it takes courage to be a little selfish. You've spent so long living for others. When are you going to live for yourself?" That question hit me hard. It was provocative, direct, and somehow irresistibly true. He seemed to see something in me that I myself had forgotten. A woman with desires, dreams, and a whole life yet to live. Maybe, my voice came out as a whisper. Maybe you're right. I found myself looking at the horizon, as if out there was the answer I was looking for. Beside me, Nathan smiled. Not just any smile. It was something more. A silent invitation. "You're not alone in this, Claudia," he said, his voice low, almost a shared secret. Starting over is easier when you have company. His words carried weight, but they were not empty promises. They were an invitation, not just for a future, but for us. And then the rain came. Those afternoons when the sound of drops hitting the window made everything seem more intimate. We were in the room, each lost in our own thoughts, until he broke the silence. "You miss him, don't you?" The question came like an arrow, and I knew exactly who he was talking about. Jonathan. I took a deep breath, my gaze fixed on my hands. "Every day," I admitted. "But lately, I've been missing something more. Me." Nathan came over, sitting next to me, so close that the heat from his body seemed to invade mine. When he held my hand, it was as if an electric current ran through my body, awakening something I didn't even know was still there. "Claudia, you deserve more than just living on memories," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "You deserve to be happy now." His gaze was intense, almost disconcerting, but I couldn't look away. The rain hitting the windows was just a background, insignificant compared to what was happening between us. It wasn't just words. It was something much bigger, something I didn't know if I was ready to face. When Nathan brought my hand to his lips, his warm breath touching my skin, a shiver ran down my spine. He murmured, almost as if he was making a promise, "You're not alone, Claudia." Such simple words, but they carried all the weight of the world at that moment. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of possibilities, full of something none of us dared to name. The next day, we walked through the forest. The smell of wet earth still hung in the air, fresh from the rain that had fallen. Nathan walked beside me, saying nothing, but the silence between us seemed to have a life of its own, full of unspoken meanings. The sound of our footsteps on the leaves was mesmerizing, almost as if it was leading us towards something inevitable. Suddenly he stopped, and before I could ask what was wrong, he gently grabbed my arm. "Claudia, wait." I turned to him, my heart racing. His face was serious, but his eyes shone with an intensity that made me catch my breath. "Have you ever thought about what you would do if you had the chance to live it all over again?" he asked, his voice firm, but with a hint of vulnerability. "Not a second chance with Jonathan, but one with yourself." His words hit me like lightning. They opened something in me that I had been avoiding facing. "Nathan, I don't know if I can." My voice came out shaky because it was the only truth I had at that moment. He took a step closer. I could feel his heat, so close it was almost unbearable. His fingers lightly slid across my wrist, and the touch was both gentle and full of intention. "You can do it," he said, his voice firm but full of tenderness. "Because you're not alone, and I want to be by your side, not out of pity, not out of impulse, but because I choose you." The world seemed to stop at that moment. There was no sound, just the echo of my heartbeat. I didn't know if it was right or wrong, but in that look, in that touch, he offered me something I hadn't had in years, the chance to be wanted, the chance to be loved again. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, I felt something different, a calm that I hadn't known in a long time. It was as if an invisible weight had finally been lifted from my shoulders, freeing something within me that I didn't even know was trapped. I looked out the window, and there he was, Nathan, sitting on the bench in the garden, under a starry sky that looked like it was painted by hand. Something in his manner called to me, as if he had been waiting for me. Without thinking much, I went downstairs, feeling the cool night air against my skin. "Nathan," I called, my voice gently cutting through the silence. He turned to me, and that smile of his, oh, that smile, seemed capable of lighting up the entire universe. "Are you well?" he asked, his voice low and engaging. I just nodded, sitting next to him. We didn't say anything for a few minutes, but the silence between us was comfortable, as if everything that needed to be said was already in the air. "I don't know what the future holds," I confessed, my eyes lost in the stars. "But for once, I think I'm ready to find out," without saying a word. He grabbed my hand, intertwining his fingers with mine. His touch was firm, but at the same time full of tenderness. "And I want to be there with you, Claudia," he said, his voice soft but full of certainty. Whatever. There was something powerful about that moment. It wasn't about erasing Jonathan, or forgetting the past. It was about giving myself permission to live again, in a way that made sense now. As we looked up together at the sky, I felt something that had long seemed impossible: hope. But it was not an empty hope. It was alive, pulsating. It was ours.